With Senihor, who joins me right now. Congressman, very good to have you.
Hi, Neil. Good to be with you. Actually, I want to correct to Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader. We talked about scheduling and talked about the bill.
Okay, I apologize for that. Washington Post reported otherwise, but who am I to trust the Washington Post? Let me ask you, though, sir, why even insert the language, as Nancy Pelosi did, government shutdown? No one is saying that. No one has been even broaching that.
Well, I think that the Speaker does not want a government shutdown. McConnell's indicated he doesn't want a government shutdown. And none of the rest of us in the leadership want a government shutdown. But, Neil, there have been some people talking about shutting down the government if they can't reverse the immigration action that the President took. So it's not without having been discussed by some people, not in the leadership.
Fair enough, but I guess what she just volunteered that I want to avoid, that came out of nowhere because it's only been a couple, and others have argued just as vehemently for trying to tempt the Republicans, so you can go back and forth on that. But having said that, there are others who argue that if Democrats get in a lame duck session a spending bill that carries it essentially through much of 2015, you guys have extracted much more than the electorate wanted you to in a midterm election that repudiated you, not you individually, Congressman. What do you say?
Yeah, Neil, I don't agree with that proposition. Assuming we pass, as I think we should pass, a bill consistent with the Paul Ryan and Senator Murray agreement that was passed by the Congress overwhelmingly in a bipartisan fashion, assuming that we stay within those constraints, which we have to, consistent with the agreement, then I think we are doing what, in a bipartisan, overwhelming fashion, the Congress said it was going to do. The issue, as you well know, is whether or not they're going to add in extraneous issues into the appropriation bill, which may make it
let's assume they don't do that. Every party kind of threatens that kind of.
We'll support it.
You're better legislating than I am. But let's say what the Republicans agree to is let's get an extension that will take us to the new Congress when it comes in, because after all, it's going to be a whole new bunch, including a whole new Senate. What would you say?
What I would say, Neil, is that undermines the confidence of the people running programs in government. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever you think. But
no, I mean, you'd just be reflecting the reality and the will of the people in the midterm election, and then the onus and the burden would be on both parties then, under the new makeup and the new Senate and the new House with the President, right?
Neil, very frankly, as you well know, we are 3 months past when we should have passed these bills, and none of them have been adopted, none. So that they all should have been adopted by October.
Whose fault is that?
Both parties, I think. But I would, my perspective, and it may sound like a partisan perspective, is that in the House they passed 8 out of the 12 bills, or 7 out of the 12 bills, and they couldn't pass the other 5, frankly, because they didn't want their members to vote on them before the election, because it would have required doing some things that they thought the electorate would not like. In the Senate, Harry Reid couldn't bring any of the bills to the floor because he believed they would be subject to endless debate, and he couldn't get 60 votes to shut down that debate. So both parties are somewhat responsible, but that's not the point. The point is this is last year's work.
No, you're right about that, and both parties are to blame. But on this, Denny, maybe help me with this, because now lately I've been watching the fight over what's going to become of the health care law, whether you take away some of the onerous provisions. There seems to be a coalition building, even among some formerly resistant Democrats, to remove onerous features like the surgical device tax and all the rest. Not clear as to how they make up for that revenue. But I'm wondering, I'm hearing other powerful Democrats, including outgoing Senator Tom Harkin, who is saying that we had the power to do it in a way that would have simplified health care, referring to the law, sir, made it more efficient and made it less costly. And we didn't do it. You hear those comments. You also hear comments from Chuck Schumer bemoaning the way this all went down. And I'm wondering whether it's like, rats abandoning ship. What's going on here? I mean, these guys seem to be saying the whole thing was a mistake.
Well, I don't think it was a mistake at all.
So you don't agree with what Ida was saying?
No, I don't agree that it was a mistake. I don't agree that it was perfect. I don't want anybody confused by what I'm saying. I think passing the Affordable Care Act was a positive step for the American people. We've seen millions and millions of people added to having insurance and having access to affordable quality health care, which is what the intent was.
Did you see the possible fallout, though, of a lot more people paying a lot higher premiums, and a lot of the young people who did that coverage, to your credit, paying, you know, very sky-high deductibles? Did you see that?
Well, I think young people can sign up for a number of different policies, some of which have higher deductibles than others. But the fact of the matter is, what the real problem, in my view, Neil, is we had an election in 2010. A group of members in the House of Representatives and the Senate were elected who hated the Affordable Care Act. And their total focus was repeal of the Affordable Care Act, not fixing it, not make it work better.
No, I understand that, but now you're right. But so now in 2014, going into 2015, many in your own party, Steny, are saying, all right, we got to do something here. They're divorcing themselves from it. They might still be for keeping it, but they are very, very nervous, and they saw what happened to their colleagues who were up this year, and their memories, their roadkill.
No, frankly, I don't think the Affordable Care Act played a controlling act in this election. I think, in my experience,
I don't know. I think it was a big factor. Come on, it was a huge factor.
Neil, I traveled all over this country. There was not as much discussion. Frankly, the ads were not focused on the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, but then what made Chuck Schumer say what he said? What made
No.
You don't say that these are bright men. I mean, what did they see that you are not
Neil,
seeing?
I'm not disagreeing with Chuck Schumer. Right. Don't create a disagreement where none exists. Both Chuck and I would say, look, this was a very large piece of legislation passed in a very clumsy fashion. Yeah. It was passed in a clumsy fashion because Republicans in the United States Senate would not give 60 votes to go to conference. So we adopted a Senate bill without correcting it. We needed to have spent the last 4 years, in my opinion, in fixing and making work better.
Fine, but do you think Gruber, whatever you make of him, whatever you make of him, how influential he was, I don't know who to believe now, because they always say he was crucial and then he's not crucial. Nancy Pelosi said he was crucial, then she forgot his name, so I'll leave that aside. But do you think everything he said has hurt the law and hurt the view of the law and hurt Americans' perception of the law, and Kathleen Sebelius herself compounded it by all but calling Americans idiots for not appreciating all that was good in it?
I don't think Americans are idiots at all, nor are they stupid. The fact of the matter is this is a complicated law, and literally tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars was spent to making it look terrible. And so Americans getting bombarded with this attack that it was an awful bill, that was socialism, which of course it's not. It's private markets offering insurance on a marketplace which
Americans
is very
are
much
seeing
free
a
market.
lot of the problems for themselves right now, right?
I mean,
that's not a nightmare, right?
Are there problems? There are problems. Very frankly, there were a lot of problems before the bill was passed.
Right.
What has happened now is when people have a problem, what do they say? It was the Affordable Care Act. It may well be the insurance companies who don't want to cover, don't want to pay out for a particular malady, so that they would have been blamed before the Affordable Care Act with that failure. But now everybody says, well, it must be the Affordable Care Act. You just saw that for now 4 years in a row, health care costs have been stable. That is a historic accomplishment. Did the Affordable Care Act
premiums have not. What's always left out of that argument, Congressman, is premiums have not been stable. They've been skyrocketing. Maybe we're addressing overall medical costs. Maybe that's a result of a very weak recovery. But to credit the law is a bit of a stretch, don't you think? Because then Chuck Schumer would have referred to that, and he didn't.
Look, I think you're exploding what Chuck Schumer had to say.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying, believe me, if Chuck Schumer found good news like that, and Steny, you're a good and honorable man, I'm just telling you, he would have leapt on that like me, a Ponderosa buffet, and he didn't.
Look, Neil, come on now. You've been in the legislative process. You're a pro here. Clearly, you passed a piece of legislation. It is a complex piece of legislation, and you need to see how it operates.
You have no regrets? You have no regrets at all?
I have regrets that we didn't take more time to consider it in a way that was the appropriate legislative process, and that is to go to a conference committee. The only reason we couldn't go to a conference committee was because the Republicans would not vote to do so.
I don't want to blame it, but the medical device tax, that's going to go, right? Medical device tax goes.
Let me tell you, that's in this country.
Right.
You know why? Because people don't like to pay for things. This was a pay for in the bill. Now, if we're going to take medical device tax, we need to substitute it for some other way to pay for it. You know, the Republican Congress and the House of Representatives, we passed about $600 billion in tax cuts over the last 4 months that were not paid for. That's the same thing. Nobody likes to pay for things. If that's the case, we ought not to buy things, health care or anything else.
Standing order. Thank you very, very much.
You bet, Neil.
We'll watch closely.